Welcome to Banyen Books, Branches of Wisdom, celebrating the joy of bright ideas and heartful lifelong learning. Branches of Wisdom is a series of intimate conversations with the world's most influential authors and visionaries. We explore spirituality and the human mind, ecology and culture. Most episodes are recorded with a live audience. You can join our live events and submit questions to your favorite guests. Check out our upcoming schedule at banyen.com. Since 1970, Banyen Books has been a rich oasis at the crossroads of wisdom and philosophy, offering resources for humanity's evolving paths. We're a locally owned, independent bookstore in the heart of Vancouver's Kitsilano neighborhood. Visit us in person or shop online at banyen.com. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews for the podcast. And now, enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Branches of Wisdom, the Banyen Books podcast. I'm your host, Ross McKeechee. Banyen Books acknowledges that although we have people joining us from all over the world for these live stream events, the physical location of our store in Vancouver's Kitsilano neighborhood is on the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Our very special guest today is Rick Hanson, PhD, who is a psychologist, senior fellow at UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center, and a New York Times best-selling author. He began meditating in 1974 and is the founder of the Wellspring Institute for Neuroscience and Contemplative Wisdom. He has lectured at NASA, Google, Oxford, and Harvard, and taught in meditation centers worldwide. An expert on positive neuroplasticity, his work has been featured on CBS, NPR, the BBC, and many other major media sources. His books are available in 31 languages with over 1 million copies in English alone, and they include Neurodharma, Resilient, Hardwiring Happiness, Just One Thing, Buddha's Brain, and Mother Nurture. Today, Dr. Rick Hanson is with Banyen Books in conversation about his new book titled Making Great Relationships: Simple Practices for Solving Conflicts, Building Connection, and Fostering Love. Relationships are usually the most important part of a person's life, but they're often stressful and frustrating or simply awkward, distant, and lonely. It's easy to feel stuck. As a psychologist, couples and family counselor, husband and father, Dr. Hanson has learned what makes relationships go badly and what you can do to make them go better. Making great relationships will teach you how to relate better than ever with all the people in your life. If you'd like to learn more about today's honored guest, you can visit his website, which is rickhanson.net. And today we're featuring the Global Compassion Coalition and encouraging everyone to check it out and join and to make a donation if you feel inspired. The website is globalcompassioncoalition.org. Ladies and gentlemen of the Banyen community, please join me in a warm welcome for our guest today, Dr. Rick Hanson.
Thank you, Ross. That was
Hello,
really
Dr.
touching.
Hanson.
Oh, hello. That was touching and beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about the Global Compassion Coalition?
Oh, I feel very appreciative that you're asking that. Briefly, people can go to the website and check it out. It's a new organization that's essentially forming a new kind of commons for millions of people in organizations around the world who care about suffering, want to relieve it, and want to change its systemic causes grounded in historic systems of injustice that, of course, are still operating today. So it's very ambitious. It's unprecedented. We're basically taking a page out of our ancestors' playbook, speaking of the First Nations people and our own and our hunter-gatherer ancestors who lived on the basis of compassion and justice together even though often they were competing and even aggressively with other bands. But in their band, social life was grounded in compassion and justice, as many scholars have now shown. So how do we scale what worked in our ancestors' bands of roughly 40 or so people living together their whole lives? How do we scale that up to 8 billion people to finally get a grip on serious injustice? 10,000 kids a day die of hunger. We're racing toward climate catastrophe. 80% of the people of the world live under the thumb or the boot of some tyrant, more or less. Only 6% in a high functioning democracy. What can we finally do about that? To do something, we have to come together. We have to come together. Many wonderful things are happening in their own ponds or silos. What could we create together, as our ancestors did, by celebrating the work of each other, collaborating together, and coalescing our resources at a scale that's big enough to be strong enough to make the world that we long for? So that's the vision of the Global Compassion Coalition, grounded in compassion. Check it out. Everyone's welcome. If you have a belly button, you're welcome to join. All are welcome. It's totally free. It's all about us. It's all about members. And if you're moved to offer a donation to help us do our work, I'm not making any money from it, that's for sure. We'd really welcome that. So thanks, Ross. Thanks for allowing me to say all that.
Oh, that's so great. Thanks for sharing that. Now, this book, your new book, Making Great Relationships, is really grounded in what you were just talking about. And you share all of these wonderful practices. In fact, there's 50 sections, 50 chapters, and each one involves different contemplations and practices and things that we can do to nurture compassion and better relationships. I wonder if you might lead us through a short practice right now, just to sort of anchor us before we continue our conversation.
That'd be a pleasure. It would be good for me too. So this is one of my favorite practices. I call it 3 breaths. You can literally do it in 1, 2, 3 breaths. I'll take a little more time here. And it's basically being aware of certain things while you breathe. And of course, if you don't want to focus on breathing, you don't have to. You could pick something like a body sensation elsewhere in your foot, elsewhere, such as in your feet, or just get a sense of the spaciousness of the room you're in, or an image or any other feeling. But I'll refer to breathing. Okay, here we go. Get comfortable, settle in, here you are. Be aware of breathing. And breathe while feeling your chest as a whole. Left and right, front and back, top and bottom, all together. Single field of many sensations. Breathing while feeling your chest as a whole. Letting awareness be spacious and wide, with your eyes open or closed, breathing while feeling your chest as a whole. And then in the second sort of breath, being aware of sensations of breathing in the area of your heart. If you like, putting a hand on your heart. And in the second sort of breath, breathing while feeling caring. Keeping it simple, focusing on the feelings of kindness, wishing well, appreciating, perhaps loving, maybe being aware of beings that you care for, and then focusing on the experience of being caring. So, breathing while feeling caring. Know what it's like to feel compassionate or kind or friendly. Even loving. Breathing while feeling caring. And then in the third sort of breath, which might be a little more challenging, breathing while feeling cared about. Simple experience of feeling included, part of a group, feeling seen, understood, perhaps feeling appreciated, respected, perhaps feeling liked or loved. Being aware of what it's like to be with those who appreciate you or like you, even love you. And focusing on the feelings of this, disengaging from any complicated stories, any conflicts or issues. Simply breathing while feeling cared about, finding the sense of feeling cared about, and allow yourself to sink into that sense while you breathe. Breathing while feeling cared about. Keep coming back to what's simple and accessible for you. We'll take another half minute or so here, resting in feeling cared about as you breathe. And we can finish here with a general sense of lovingness, flowing in and flowing out, perhaps with sensations in the region of your heart. Lovingness, flowing in and flowing out. Thank you, Ross. Thanks for letting me do that.
Thank you, Rick. That was really a great way to start. I noticed the slight difference in sensation around caring about others and allowing myself to be cared for. I noticed you pointed out that for some of us that might be even more challenging. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So many people find that it's straightforward to care about others and to feel, kind, compassionate, friendly, committed to justice, things like that. But when it comes to receiving it, people can feel blocked, and there can be fears associated with it, or memories of pain, maybe betrayal, or just a kind of a lack of feeling cared about. And as social mammals, social primates, it's as important to us as breathing, literally, for long-term survival to feel cared about. You may know that chronic loneliness, which you could say is sort of in some ways, an example of not feeling so cared about. Chronic loneliness has serious physical health consequences, roughly equivalent to smoking half a pack of cigarettes a day. So we need this. And yet it's often difficult for people to actually have experiences of feeling cared about, let alone build up the internal emotional memories of that, which are the foundation of traits of feeling loved, worthy, lovable, and so forth. And so the little practice that we did there is an example of a broader point, which is if we work backwards from what we want to grow inside, like if I think probably many people, and they might be prepared to comment here in the chat. There are several hundred people here, I think, that, would you like to feel more cared about? Would you like to feel loved? Would you like to feel liked, authentically liked? Would you like to feel that people respect you? Would you like to feel appropriately appreciated? Most people would say yes. Okay, then the question is, how do we grow it? And that's where positive neuroplasticity comes in. In a nutshell, it's classic learning. Whatever you want to grow inside yourself, you must first experience. So if you want to develop the trait of feeling loved, you have to start with states, experiences of feeling loved. And then on the basis of those experiences, learn from them, internalize the experiences so you over time feel loved. And everyday life typically gives us many little opportunities to feel cared about in one of 5 basic ways. I'm going to do it at a hierarchy: feeling included, seen, appreciated, liked, and loved, kind of in order of intensity and often, importance for people. But daily life gives us many opportunities, at least to be included and seen and appreciated, if not liked and sometimes loved. When you have those opportunities, try to help yourself have the experience. When the facts are that case, let yourself have the experience. And then when you have that experience, really take it in again and again and again and again and again. And that's a general principle for anything you want to grow. And in this little practice here, it wasn't like just walking down the street, suddenly you feel loving. I had to cue you up. So I did what I could to cue you up into an experience. And if you couldn't have that experience at will with my guidance, it could just be, not your day, right? The moon is in Scorpio, or I have no idea, something like that. But probably it's a clue. It could be a clue that, that would be a good state of being to start exploring more, to be able to find your way into, particularly when it's fundamental as feeling cared about. Mm-hmm. That's kind of it. And in my view also, which, as someone who deeply appreciates profound states of non-interference with the stream of consciousness, choiceless awareness, radical, non-dual, dropped into the ground of all. Yes. And meanwhile, there's a place for being able to work with the mind, on occasion, certainly. And the key to being able to work with the mind a lot is states and traits, being able to disengage from problematic states of being, typically initially through mindfulness, just creating some breathing room around it. And then over time, doing what you can to release it through various means, including doing what you can with your circumstances, realistically. And the other aspect is growing the good. This is what the Buddha talked about in terms of wise effort, where you're reducing what's problematic, painful, and harmful and suffering, causing and saturated. And then also you're growing the good. And the way to grow the good in particular is to move from states to traits and, appreciate experiences that are wholesome, and then help yourself learn from them rather than wasting them on your brain. That's a lot of shtick there. I should shut up now, but we'll apply these general ideas to the very particular messy good topics we're going to get into.
Excellent. Well, you talked there about moving from states to traits. And in the introduction of this really awesome book, Making Great Relationships, you write, it usually takes a good deal of time to change the world around you. Interchange can happen a lot faster. For most of us, maybe when we're thinking about relationships, a lot of us might be thinking about the other person and what we need them to do to change for things to be better. Wondering if you can explain this idea a bit more for us around how it is that interchange will benefit our relationships.
Oh, that's great. And you really nailed the point there, right? That's the center of it. I had a lot to learn. I started out really shy, awkward, dorky, uptight, insecure, really awkward. And I had to learn along the way that by shifting things internally with what I thought and what I said, this book's about what you can think and say each day to make your relationships better. And so inside ourselves, for example, we can become more skillful, and we can deliberately do things like, for example, recognize that our own needs matter. The very first chapter in the book is foundational. It's be loyal to yourself. A lot of people don't have much sense of loyalty to themselves, even though they're really for other people. Being loyal to yourself, or being able to practice with your intense reactions. And one chapter is also called Use Anger, Don't Let It Use You. In other words, we feel what we feel. We can't suppress it, or we shouldn't suppress it. But on the other hand, acting it out in harmful ways, as I have definitely more than once, painfully, is problematic. So we can learn how to manage our reactions. And then we can also develop internal skills that then we apply. We can learn how to speak more effectively with other people. We can learn how to be assertive. We can learn how to rest in fieriness sometimes. It's determination sometimes, without letting hatred or ill will poison our heart. We can learn these things. These are learnable, right? And we can also learn when it's necessary how to resize a relationship. As the book progresses, it starts with foundational skills and capacities in relationships, really important, very foundational. And then it moves more and more into tough problems. What do you do with someone you're in an ongoing conflict with? What do you do with an adult child who won't call you back, right? What do you do with an ex that you're raising kids together with who's like truly a nightmare? What do you do? It's a what do you do? This book is very much about what do I do next? I did this, they said that, I did this, and then they did that, and like, whoa, what next, right? And so for my background is 40 years, I guess, of doing therapy one way or another with people, and in my own marriage, 41 years or so, I've learned a lot along the way of the stuff you can do. And I think it's important to know what you can do, right? Concepts are great, but at the end of the road, the great teachers were all super focused on whoosh, coming down, grounding. What's it like to be you? What are you going to say next? That's where the rubber really meets the road. That's the wellspring of the next moment of existing. And that's where we have a lot of influence. The past we can't change, but we have a lot of influence over what is becoming.
You talked about the first chapter, which is be loyal to yourself. And I'm wondering if you can talk about what that actually looks like and some of the obstacles that we might face in the process of trying to build that loyalty to ourselves.
All right, great. Well, common obstacles are the internalization of different kinds of oppression, you could say. The internalization of messages that you don't matter, or as you belong to a group of people, like classically girls and women who tend to get socialized, and there are other examples too, tend to get socialized as a generalization into deferring their needs for the sake of taking care of others, for example. So there can be a lot of internalization. Or maybe you stood up for yourself as a kid, and whack, it was not a good, you got punished in various ways. Or maybe in a group of people, you stood up or stood out. And the Japanese proverb, I think, is the nail that stands out gets hammered down. So we can internalize a lot of that. What do you do about it? I find there are three things in particular that are really helpful. Well, actually, four. I'll just do it this way. So first, know what it's like to be supportive of another person. You're loyal to them. You're for them. Your kid, your friend, your aging parents, the planet. You care about. What's it like to be strong on behalf of someone? Not a jerk. Not over the top, but like you're serious about it. You care. Then imagine being that way for yourself. And notice the blocks that often that will surface when you shift that attitude to yourself. Like, oh, I don't deserve that. Or, oh, if I do that, bad things will happen. And then that's an opportunity for mindful self-exploration. So that's one. Second, know what it feels like to feel strong or determined in general. Like holding a pose in yoga, going out in wilderness. I've done a lot in wilderness. Just standing by the bedside of an aging parent or a friend at the hospital, your feet hurt, but you're still there. Know what that feels like. And then imagine being that way for yourself. Determined, strong, steady, enduring. Third thing you can do is recognize why it's fair. It's principled. In other words, if we are to be, decent and fair to all beings includes the one with our own name tag. If it's fair for them, it's fair for you. Rights for them are rights for you. Rules for you are rules for them. That's fundamental foundation of justice. That's foundational. It's recognizing that a lot of the shoulds and rules and beliefs we've internalized about our own worth and rights are just caca, doo-doo. They're wrong. It's not fair. And so you start to recognize the fairness. It's fair. You don't want to, you're not above others, but you're not below them. It's fair. Then the last is self-compassion, is to bring a quality of supportiveness and tenderness and caring to your own suffering, broadly defined, that you would to another person. So you're treating yourself like you matter in that kind of emotional and nurturing way. Self-compassion is incredibly important. And of course, it's where we start. It's not where we end. Compassion for yourself is not wallowing in self-pity. It actually makes people stronger, more able to bounce back from hardship and even trauma. So anyway, those are 4 things. And that's probably an illustration of what I do in the book altogether. I really want to get to how. All right, this is what you could do. And here you go. So that's what the book is.
Yeah. And every chapter has a section titled How. So you're not just giving sort of the ideas, but saying, here's how you can actually put it into practice in your life.
Yeah, that's right.
You were talking about self-compassion, and there's another chapter in the first section, which is titled Forgive Yourself.
Yeah.
And I'd like to share a quote because I really liked this, and I wanted to get you to expand on it a bit for us. You wrote, the beneficial purpose of guilt, shame, or remorse is learning, not punishment, so that you don't make that mistake again. Anything that's not about learning is mainly needless suffering. I'm wondering if you can expand on this point for us, Dr. Hanson. How can we work with heavy emotions like guilt, shame, remorse in order to learn and grow?
Well, first, please call me Rick, or I'll have to call you Mr. or Dr. somebody too. Okay, Rick and Ross, the Rick and Ross show, right? That's pretty cool. R&R. I like that, rest and recreation.
That's not bad. I like it.
Yeah, I like that. Gosh, well, that sentence is a pretty good sentence because it just says it, right? And so that the process of self-forgiveness is a process. It's a journey. And it's one of the most important things. And to do that, it has to begin with accepting responsibility and clear seeing. It starts with clear seeing what was actually the case, what were actually the impacts, the whole picture, and responsibility for your part. That's foundational, because we can't forgive ourselves for something that we're still denying in some way or downplaying. You just have to, you start with responsibility, and then you feel appropriate remorse. And because you've begun with responsibility and appropriate remorse, you're then entitled to move into a release. Now, the releasing of the anger at yourself, the pounding on yourself, the hatred of yourself, the being mad at yourself, the gradual releasing of that does not mean denying the moral impact of what you did. Maybe every time you think of it, you'll have an appropriate wince of guilt, and you'll be crystal clear. You'll never, ever want to do that again, right? That can be alongside this releasing. So over time, you're not carrying it around. It's not preoccupying you. That's kind of the key. You don't ruminate about it. It doesn't invade your dreams. There's a sense of release about it that has a blessing quality. I mean, the heart of forgiving is giving, right? We give that release to others when we authentically forgive them in various ways, and we give that release, that beautiful gift, the salve, the balm, the blessing of forgiving when we forgive ourselves.
The second section of the book is Warm the Heart. And one of the things that I really loved is in your chapter, See the Person Behind the Eyes.
Yeah.
It's about the need to build empathy. And you say that breakdowns in empathy shake the foundations of a relationship. Why is empathy so important in building and maintaining strong relationships?
Well, it's interesting to think about. Well, I was thinking about ants going past each other, in a line, and they're signaling each other in various ways, but they don't have much sense of the internal states of each other, for example. And without empathy, humans passing each other on the street would be like ants. We would have no feeling for the inner world of each other. And sometimes it's okay. There you are, you're just walking down the street. It's okay that you're in ant mode because you got stuff on your mind. But in general, that would be a terrible way to live. So empathy allows us to enter the world of the other person and flip it around. It puts us in a stronger position to ask for others to do us the same. And, to feel unseen is a terrible wound. To feel like you don't exist in some ways, you don't matter in the mind of another person, the heart of another person. That's a terrible experience. So I find that one of the simplest gifts we can give other people is to get a feeling for them as a being, not just like their face. Oh, there's Ross over there. Nice guy, got a beard, da-da. Who are you? Right? Who are you? And not in some creepy, invasive way, who are you? But just like, an openness, a receptivity, a seeing of the being behind the eyes of the other person. And whether you're walking down the street and you're just kind of registering, there's a real person over there whose livingness matters as much to them as it does to me. Oh, or here's my partner. I'm in a tiff with someone. What's it like to be them? What's my impact on them, even if it's not my intent? What's it like for them to be around me? Oh, this is all really useful information. And to be clear, empathy is not agreement. We can empathize with people that are our adversaries. We can empathize with people that we're asserting ourselves against and pursuing justice with, perhaps even. But we don't have to give up our empathy. I think I have another chapter called "Don't Put Anyone Out of Your Heart." Maybe, yeah. And we can put them out of our governmental buildings. We can put them out of our business or our bed, but we don't have to put them out of our heart. So to me, that's the foundational section you were getting at there in the book, and it lays a foundation which can be quite profound. And then on that foundation, we can be a lot more effective with people when we're in a conflict with them, if we're, standing in this way.
Rick, there's two things I want to kind of unpack from what you're just talking about. First, I want to talk a little bit more about empathy. Then I want to circle back to the idea of putting no one out of our heart. So just kind of earmarking that. You in the chapter on empathy, you talk about the power of tuning into faces.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that actually means, what we're looking for in faces, and the sort of neurobiological thing that's going on there?
Oh, sure. Like I'm just doing it right now with your face. And so humans evolved in a very expressive face because we're very social. And so we basically also evolved very attuned capacities to read facial expressions because the two go together, right? No sense in evolving a transmitter if you're not also evolving a receiver in the sense of recognizing facial expressions. And Paul Ekman and others have really identified micro expressions, particularly around the eyes and around the sides of the mouth. So if you really want to tune into somebody, just kind of be very receptive to those two parts of their face. And there's a lot of information there, and you can track a lot of nuances when you just kind of hang out, with somebody in that way. And if you like, one of the kind of a cool TV show about this is called Lie to Me. I thought the first season was the best season. Anyway, good acting, and they play off of the Ekman research, and it's really quite interesting to become more aware of what's actually happening in people's faces. And faces are great,
Yeah.
including yours.
Oh, thank you very much. I concur about yours. Now, this idea of putting no one out of our hearts.
Yeah.
This chapter, I thought that chapter was really, really beautiful, and the skillfulness involved in it, the nuance. I'm just going to share part of, there's a longer quote, but I'm just going to share part of it. You write, sometimes you do have to hang up the phone, block someone on Facebook, or stay at a motel when visiting relatives. In extreme situations, it may be necessary to distance yourself completely from another person for a while or forever. Take care of yourself and listen to that inner knowing about what's best for you. So how do we do that? How do we set these boundaries? and do what we need to protect ourselves while also keeping our heart open and not casting someone out of our heart.
Yeah. We are getting at a huge topic, especially, like in a long-term significant relationship, like a relative or someone who's been a friend for quite a while. It's a significant relationship. So on the one hand, there's a classic line, I think, from Maya Angelou: when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. So on the one hand, we want to recognize the signals. And for example, ask yourself, what does it feel like for me, yourself, when I'm around that person? Do I feel larger, happier, lighter, more supported? Or do I feel, and especially when I walk away, do I feel smaller, contracted, poked at, unseen, diminished, made less? Huh. That's very much a clue. Second, it's a sad fact that physical and emotional abuse are widely common. And, in all walks of life, all classes, all populations, all groups, it's an issue. And so if there's any possibility of that, even threatened, physical harm or, and when I mean emotional abuse, I mean the term really, kind of seriously, technically. Like, I don't want to diminish the specific horribleness of actual emotional abuse rather than just rancor and discord and yelling at each other, which is not great, not good at all. But you know what I mean? But I just kind of want to put a pin on that. Anyway, the point is, if there's any real opportunity or for that, or if that's threatened or actually happening, be safe. And the standard advice is seek outside help first to eliminate the possibility of any physical or emotional violence and then start to address the issue. So take care of yourself. I want to be clear about that side, right? Then on that foundation, fences make for good neighbors. The proverb, there need to be boundaries, and you just sort of watch with people. You say something and then they do something and you're like, what? Maybe it was just a one-off. Then it happens the second time, like, wow, starting to see a pattern here. And maybe you inquire about it. Like, what was that? Did I misunderstand something here? Or, and there are many skillful ways to inquire. I go into them in the book, sharing your own experience, starting, kind of going slow initially as best you can, slowing it down as best you can. Find out what. And then if you find that the person will not repair with you, they won't get that what they did was problematic for you, or they won't, even at a minimum, maybe refuse to get it's inherently problematic, but they're at least willing to adjust around you, right? But if you come up to some imperviousness around repair, that's a huge turning point in a relationship. That's a fork in the road. What do you do? And very often, I think generally, if it's clear that a person will not repair certain things and will not repair the lack of repair, then you have to circumscribe that part of the relationship. You have to resize that and disengage from them in that way if you possibly can. And if you're still stuck dealing with them, they're a coworker who's just going to keep dissing you in a meeting and you're stuck with that job and so forth, then you do what you can internally to have it have less and less impact. But claiming the right to disengage, claiming the right to be autonomous is foundational to opening your heart into intimacy. Because if love and autonomy go together, love and power go together, they support each other. And if you don't have the right to take care of yourself, then how can you possibly open out into deep intimacy, right? So the two really much go together. And then the details are details. Sometimes you tell the person you're resizing the relationship. Sometimes you just kind of quietly resize it. Suddenly you're not having lunch with them every week. You're having lunch with them once a month or every few months. Or suddenly your visits home are a lot shorter, or access to the grandkids is a little more circumscribed. You see what I'm saying? Or you start looking for another job. So, maybe you often do it on your own, but paradoxically, actually, to finish, being able to resize a relationship often helps you maintain it. Like I have friends who are, good people, done a lot of good stuff with them. And yet our politics have so radically diverged, and they're just on it about politics. So I just avoid that topic. And, you know, I've resized the relationship in that regard. But otherwise, we could laugh about mountain climbing we did together and good times we've had and our families, but we've resized in that way.
On that topic of resizing, something I've seen not often, but sometimes is when someone tries to sort of quietly resize, step back, shift a relationship, and the other person doesn't pick up the clues or the cues,
Yeah.
isn't able to accept it, and they maybe double down and pursue.
Mhm.
Have you seen that before? And if so, what do you recommend in those kinds of situations?
Yeah, and it can be quite awkward. Also, especially if you have caring for that person. And um, so a couple of things here. So first off, in a relationship, there is often an asymmetry of wants. One person wants more contact than the other person, often. Not always, but sometimes. Uh, or a certain kind of contact. Like maybe one person in a romantic relationship just wants more conversation about this and that, and the other person does, maybe. Flip the other way, maybe one person is more interested in the erotic dimensions of the relationship than their partner is. How do you work with all that? Right? That's just fundamental. And so the book has many chapters that have to do with talking about wants. And one of them is titled Give Them What They Want, which is a paradoxical but actually very effective start, because by really taking care of your own side of the street and addressing their reasonable, as you judge, complaints and needs and wants, requests, and so forth, you start delivering the goods in a healthy way to them. You reduce causes for complaint legitimately of you. The energy starts cooling out. It gets easier and easier, and you start being put on increasingly on the moral high ground and in a very strong position now to ask for what you want. So there's stuff about that, certainly. But when at the end of it all, though, we have to be able to say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to give you that. And it's kind of poignant, right? And if you are trying to disengage from somebody and they don't get the tacit messages you're using, trying to be gentle or euphemistic about it, sometimes you just have to say it and then look for a way to say it that's the least hurtful way possible, which often is said in a kind of general or more impersonal way, like, I'm just I'm just really busy these days, or I'm having to clock a lot of time doing these other things, or just naming it. I mean, I have friends who would love more time with me, but my natural resting state is, lunch twice a year is great, right? And I just sort of say it, like, oh my God, you said it. But, well, it's okay. Maybe for me, lunch twice a year is a great way to maintain a relationship across many decades. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think that I mean, you gave a very comprehensive answer there. And I like what you just said about naming it and making it light. Just saying, this is the way I am. This is what works for me. And
yeah,
it's then they don't take it as personally, maybe in that case.
Yeah.
I just want to remind our live audience, we're going to very shortly get to some of your questions for Dr. Rick Hanson here. And but I think I want to ask you one more question first, Rick. Part 5 of the book, Speak Wisely, is by far the biggest section. And I just wanted to ask you why you decided to give this topic so much importance. There's so much in there, but maybe you can just cover a little bit about speaking wisely and why that's such a key part of relationships.
Yeah, that whole section is really about how do we actually take it out loud, right? In real, in the interaction. And what do you do when? Different kinds of what do you do when. So there were a lot of examples in there. And one of the things that I find really important is to explore the intersection of compassion and assertiveness, kindness and assertiveness, because it's fairly straightforward to be warm-hearted. It's fairly straightforward to be assertive. How do we bring both together? And that also, at the world scale, is what we're faced with too, right? How do we not demonize our adversaries politically or on the other side of the world? How do we not demonize them while at the same time standing up for our own needs and addressing the suffering that these forces are causing, right? Whether the world or in our own country. And, you know, that's another mention, I guess, of the Global Compassion Coalition, and encourage people to check it out, because I think we need to create forms in which we are actually able to explore being caring, but also being strong in terms of making the better world and coming together at a scale that's big enough to stand up against these historic forces of injustice, wealth and power, essentially, that have been making the world more or less like Game of Thrones for the last 10,000 years, compared to the previous 97% of the time people like you and me have walked the earth, grounded in compassion and justice as the foundation of social life and their politics, their decision making, and et cetera, with each other. So it's like that's the art, isn't it? Is to bring kindness and assertiveness together. So that's in part down at the local level why that part of the book is so long. Maybe we can get into the nutshell of it with people's questions or examples. I'll say one of my favorite ones from that chapter: admit fault and move on. That has saved me in my marriage, and it's not bogus. You have to admit it. It's surreal. It's not about brushing somebody off with some statement, but no, where you just cop to your stuff fully and then move into correction for the future. One of the most other useful things I've learned is to make requests for the future rather than complaints about the past. People will argue about the past forever, but just cut to the chase. What would it look like if you got what you wanted from now on? And can the two of you come to agreement about that? Those are two really useful. I think there's each a chapter, right? Admit fault and move on, and to give them what they want, and the rest of that. Yeah. Anyway, good.
We've got a few questions rolling in here, as you mentioned, and there's one from Marguerite. This is an interesting one. Marguerite says, now that we are dealing with so many relationships virtually, do you have any suggestions about how to make great relationships online or at a distance?
I think part of it is to keep regenerating your felt sense that there's a real person over there. Like I'm looking at Ross while I do that. And if you think of it, it's completely abnormal in evolutionary terms that we're looking at a two-dimensional screen with another person over there. I mean, that has only happened, right? In the last 100 or so years, movies and television, and now online. So we're not used to it. And it's easy to numb out and to kind of relate to that other person as a two-dimensional character. So it's especially important to be empathic and to keep seeing the being behind that person's eyes, and to keep feeling them and receiving their face, and and giving them the experience of feeling felt, in Dan Siegel's lovely phrase. So I think that's really important. One thing that is real is that it's sometimes challenging to give that person on the screen your completely undivided attention. It's so tempting to be also doing emails or looking at your phone or, whatever. And, hey, I've been in large meetings where, I was doing that too. And that was okay because I can listen and do fairly mundane clerical tasks at the same time. But if you're having a real conversation, like Ross, you and I are, or with others, and you're trying to be present, be fully present. And if you've got 10 minutes for full presence, give it your full presence for the 10 minutes and then get off the call, or let the other person know, hey, let's do something fairly contained here. Anyway, those are my two thoughts about that.
Right. Okay. So kind of framing it at the beginning, saying this is what I've got right now. And
if you need to, but really show up for it, because it's so easy to cheat a little bit online, and I crack up. I see people on a first date, smiling and flirting, but they're each on their phones under the table. Right? Like, sorry, defeats the purpose. Okay.
Thanks for the question, Marguerite. There's one here from their name is Yatubik on the YouTube profile. The question is, how can we convince people to keep trying new communication strategies in the relationship? Some say, well, we already tried I statements and they didn't work.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, what's the thing? It takes two to tango. And so the first place to look is at oneself. And I have a chapter called Take Care of Your Side of the Street. It's a fundamental idea, to focus on what is in your own power. So how are you doing? Is there any way you could raise your game? Perhaps. I don't know. But is there anything you could do, right, on your side? Then the second is I think I have a chapter called Talk About Talking, where you start to try to create understandings with another person and how you speak with each other. And if everything's going fine, then I think rough and tumble, loosey-goosey, jazz improv, fine, it's working. But if it's not working so well, it then helps to move into more of a pure form, like nonviolent communication from Marshall Rosenberg. And I summarize that basic approach, which is a very effective basic approach. That can often help, and to try it out, right? And then you start to observe what happens. If there's some kind of form or path, like in my book or other books. I love a book by Oren Sofer. I'm sure you have it in your wonderful bookstore, by the way. I'm a total fan of Banyen. I've been there physically. I had a lovely time there in Vancouver, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe. And maybe I'll poke my nose in there again. I'm supposed to be up in Vancouver in late July, I think. Anyway.
We'd love to see it.
Anyway, I'm going to be in incognito mode probably, but if I do roll in, I'll definitely say hi to you all.
If you see a man in a hat and sunglasses, it could be Rick. Yeah.
Woody, anyway, long story short, where was I? Yeah. Oh, yeah. You follow the form, and it's a good form, like Oren's book, You Say What You Mean, which is a real elaboration of nonviolent communication, or my book, you follow a good form, and the other person starts rebelling or is anti, and they're unwilling to repair that. That's a huge clue. It's sort of like there are green flags, yellow flags, and red flags. And if someone's just unwilling to repair, then they're not going to be your partner in solving that. Maybe you need to do everything you can to adjust the relationship, maybe give up about certain things. So you're resizing the relationship, you're carving out, really seeking that particular thing, you're carving out, you're disengaging from being upset about that thing and pushing for it. Maybe that's what you see if they won't participate with you. And then, of course, third parties are sometimes helpful, therapists, coaches, even just a one-off session. I would love a couple that would come in and basically say, Rick, we love each other, but the way we interact sucks. And we want you to watch us and give us some coaching and tips. And that's really good. That's fantastic. And, 1, 2, 3 sessions of that with somebody who kind of knows what they're doing can be super helpful for any kind of relationship with two people or family.
I just want to mention our amazing producer and events curator Jacob Steele just put up in the chat on YouTube the link to the book that you mentioned, Rick, Oren Sofer's book, Say What You Mean. So anybody who's interested can look there in the chat at the link for that.
Can I jump in? One thing I see from
Please.
Laura, who asked me to repeat the 5 ways to feel cared about.
Yeah.
This is one of the more useful things I've been in my own personal practice, because I did not feel very cared about as a kid. There was no abuse. There was not much bullying. We can be affected by both the presence of the bad and the absence of the good. But the absence of the good is often very, very consequential, even when there wasn't much presence of the bad. So I didn't feel that cared about. So it really helped me to appreciate that 5 ways you can feel included. These are the facts. When the facts are present, then try to help the feeling to arise that's appropriate given the fact. And then after you help the feeling arise, slow it down to take it in. Marinate in it. Let it sink in. Let it become part of you. Stay with it for a breath or longer, feeling it in your body, focusing on what feels good about it. all of which are factors of neuroplastic change in your brain. Duration, embodiment, reward, all of those increase internalization. Got it? So when the facts are that you are included in some way, seen, appreciated, respected, appreciated, chosen, wanted, valued, liked, all kinds of ways, and perhaps even loved. When those facts are occurring, maybe amidst other things, maybe the person is like a good friend who's really annoying. You know what I mean? Or a parent who loves you dearly, but they give you so much unwanted advice about how to raise your kids, it drives you crazy. Okay. But amidst all those other things, beam in on what your heart is hungry for and bring a big spoon.
I love it. I think we have time for one more question
Sure.
from the audience. And thanks to everyone. The Banyen community is just so awesome always. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here and your questions. This one's from Sam, who says, can you speak to ghosting and what to do if you've been ghosted?
Oh, that's so interesting. As I understand it, basically someone just disengages and they won't respond to your attempts to contact them, right? And there are many, many levels of that. Some extremely painful ones happen in families in which, relatives will just, blow each other off, blow somebody off. It's like you're dead to me, more or less. Like, oh my God, what a wound. And occasionally, we really do need to cut off contact with someone who's just abusive. They're horrible. It always goes badly when you interact with them. But I think that's a nuclear option. And a lot of people, and frankly, a lot of, I did it myself. A lot of people do it with their aging parents or other family members. And, don't use that nuclear option casually because it is horrible if you're on the receiving end. And this person's talking about the impact on them, whatever the detail is of being ghosted. So what do you do about it? You take the steps you can, maybe through third parties, or you reach out, you try to, do what you can. Sometimes there's something to acknowledge that other person wants you to admit, and you find your way to an authentic admission of some kind. I've done that sometimes with people, but sometimes that's just never enough for them. They're gonna cut you off, and they don't, for me, have the moral wherewithal to recognize their impact on you. Obviously, they don't have compassion for your suffering. It's one thing for someone to say, I just want to let you know, I was really creeped out by what happened on our last date, and I don't want to date you anymore, and I'm good. I don't want to have any more contact. Maybe it's like that, and you just have to live with that and go, okay, and not be a jerk when someone wants to distance from you. That's really important too, obviously. And then having done all the things you can in the outer world, and I'm a super believer in coping. There is no replacement for action in the outer world that's effective and skillful, but there are huge limitations on what results we can actually get in the outer world. Meanwhile, in the inner world, we can be very influential. And then how do you come to peace with it? How do you come to a kind of equanimity about it that accepts it? That for me, I don't ever get to peace about someone who's wronged me. Let's say this person has wronged you. It's not just a clean, they just kind of don't want to be friends anymore, and that's their right. But let's say they actually have wronged you. I never get to peace about people who've wronged me until two things have occurred, until I have taken maximum reasonable responsibility for my part, which is sometimes zero. But the willingness to take maximum reasonable responsibility, to do an AA, a searching fearless inventory of your side of the street, that then helps you to feel free and light about what you're not responsible for. And second, I must find compassion for that other person. That's when I get to a release. So if that's helpful to you, I hope it is. And maybe I'll just speak to Marianne's question as well in the chat about moving on from grief and heartbreak. It's part of it is this, is we let the feelings flow. We try to get to the deepest level that's stirred up, which may not be about the particular loss or issue. It might be that it pulls up younger material. We try to get to the bottom, what I call the tip of the root. So it's fully experienced and done so mindfully with self-compassion, a sense of inner allies, things that are helpful, maybe with therapy or not. And then as it releases at some point, and sometimes there's a recognition of responsibility and maybe regret and remorse, maybe along the way. Now it's moving into releasing. And I think there's a place for telling yourself at some point, it's okay. I can turn a corner now. And it's not that you're trying to push all that away. It's that you're disengaging from preoccupations with it. You're moving out of the habit of preoccupation. You're moving out of rumination about it. You're saying, I can let myself turn a page here. I can turn a corner, and I can let myself not suffer so much, when I think about this again, and that's that kind of blessing. It's like a blessing permission to yourself to turn a corner when there has been a full releasing of what there is to release.
Yeah. We've been speaking with Dr. Rick Hanson about his new book, Making Great Relationships, Simple Practices for Solving Conflicts, Building Connection, and Fostering Love. And it's just been a real treat to have you with us here. I know the Banyen community, all of your books are huge sellers in our store. You're very popular in our community. And it's really a treat to have you with us. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you. And again, thanks to everybody watching or listening, and go to Banyen. Buy many books, including for people besides me. Seriously, Banyen's great. No, I love bookstores. Wow. And Banyen's awesome. So thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for having me.
Thanks for joining us for Branches of Wisdom, a podcast of Banyen Books and Sound, Canada's spiritual and healing resource since 1970. Our podcast producer is Jacob Steele. The show is edited by Abdo Habani. Watch all our conversations on YouTube by searching for Banyen Books, or listen on your favorite podcast platform. Please subscribe, follow, like, and leave your reviews and comments. We love to hear from you. For all our live events, books, and more, visit us at banyen.com.